live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com. This is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
I have a question for you, all of you. Do you believe that Canada is contributing anything to global warming? Anything at all? They claim that we're producing 1.6% of the world's CO2. That's the so-called global warming gas. And that's probably true. But here's the real question. Given all of the trees in this country, and there are billions, the vast expanse of water in the Great Lakes and other lakes, the almost endless grasslands in the prairies, the mountains, could it be possible that, in fact, all of these trees, the water, the grassland, farmers' fields, are soaking up far more CO2 than we could possibly produce? Could that be possible? Could we be very badly being led astray here on this? The fact is, I don't know if you realize this or not, but you can check it out. We humans inhabit only about 2% of the land mass in Canada. The rest is either trees, grassland, growing wheat or other crops, mountains, or is covered in water. Anyone who has ever driven across Ontario, just Ontario alone, knows you can drive for about 8 hours a day for 3 days, and you will see almost nothing except trees. Debbie, would you let him in, please? So I got someone trying to get in here. This is the man who's going to try and repair the dishwasher for me.
Oh, I see.
Oh my goodness! He's pounding on my window here.
I'm amazed. I'm amazed you can. I'm amazed you can find your house through all the trees, Lowell.
Oh my goodness!
That's funny.
But let's get back to the topic here. As I say, we humans occupy, believe it or not, and think about it, only about 2% of the landmass. The rest is trees, water, swamp, grassland, mountains. It's so about 2%. The boreal forests alone in our north cover millions of acres, untouched by human hands. We have never even been able to count the number of trees. They are billions in number. And, for some reason, none of the environmentalists, the experts, so-called, have ever suggested that all of these trees, the grassland, the water, that it's soaking up any CO2. But these same experts boast that they can reduce the carbon footprint by planting trees here in Ottawa. Now, some of you may recall, this is a number of years ago, Air Canada began to advertise that if you paid a special fee, I forget the amount, it depended upon where you were flying, but if you paid a special fee, this money would be used to, quote, offset your carbon footprint. This is Air Canada, a federal registered company, all right? Advertising that if you pay them a fee, they will offset your carbon footprint. Now, I apparently was the only journalist in the entire country who was very curious about this. How are you going to offset the carbon footprint, I asked. So I began to do some research, and I found out that there was a group of people, mostly men, in Toronto who had formed a little company that they said was able to offset carbon footprint. So I got through to them. I got through to the spokesperson, live on the air on CFRA. Some of you may recall this. It was an historic broadcast. I began to quiz him. So exactly how are you reducing the carbon footprint? And please tell me, for example, what you would do to offset, let's say, a trip from Ottawa to Toronto. What would be the carbon? What would be my carbon footprint? How would you offset that? Oh, said the person. We plant trees. Oh, how many trees would you have to plant to offset the trip from Ottawa to Toronto? Well, I'm unclear. How many trees have you planted? Well, I don't know. Okay, where are you planting these trees? These are questions I ask from here. Some of you heard it. Where are you planting these trees? Um, well, I think it's around Mission, BC. Oh, that's wonderful. My sister lives in Mission. Tell me where it is, and I'll have her go out and check. Oh, okay. How much are you charging per tree? Like, how much do you get per tree? Well, it's about $10 a tree. Wait a minute. You're charging $10 to plant one tree? They're hiring students right now to plant these trees for about 50 cents each. Oh, so that's pretty well at which point he hung up. And that was pretty well the end of the so-called carbon footprint offset with Air Canada. But I'm using this as an example of how even companies, giant companies, federally regulated companies like Air Canada claimed that all you have to do to offset carbon, CO2, is plant trees. And yet, all of the trees, the billions of trees that have existed in Canada since the Ice Age, apparently are not factored in. When they tell us we produce 1.6%, they fail to tell us how much are we soaking up with the trees, the water. That's never been entered into it. So my question is, wait a minute. If a few trees planted will offset the carbon for a trip to Toronto, how much offset would be obtained from billions of trees, millions of acres of water, grassland, etc., etc.? You know something? Nowhere is that figure. I have been totally unable to find any such figure. They can give you every other figure. How many tons of carbon dioxide are produced by this industry and that? How many tons of carbon dioxide from a cow fart? I mean, it goes on and on. I've got all of those figures. But if I ask, okay, how much carbon is soaked up in an acre of trees? Oh, we have never figured that. Well, why not? We've got millions of acres of trees. So I've come to the conclusion that, in fact, I don't see it would be possible that this country is producing any of the global emissions in the world. We're producing, but we're soaking up far more than we could possibly produce. I suggest to you, and I'd like your opinion, I suggest to you that what is really happening here is that we are soaking up not only our own carbon emissions, but the carbon emissions from another of other countries, but we are paying the bill. We undoubtedly are soaking up tons and tons of carbon dioxide being emitted from the coal-fired energy plants in China. But we are paying the bill. We are impoverishing ourselves in order to fight China's emissions, the United States emissions, etc., etc. At least that's the conclusion I've come to. If I repeat, I ask you this, and all the environmentalists who think, oh no, we've got to do this, we've got to do this. We're spending billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to try and get our emissions down to zero. We're changing our lifestyle. We're impoverishing all kinds of people. We have virtually abandoned supporting healthcare. Wait time at many of our hospitals now is 8 to 20, 25 hours. People lined up in corridors because we spent the money on trying to reduce our output of CO2. All of these things. But we're paying the bill more than any other country in the world. But what we're doing is fighting other people's emissions because our trees are soaking up everything we produce and a hell of a lot more. What a scam. I don't know if the environmentalists know this. I really don't. Or if they just haven't thought it through. Excuse me. But I ask this question again. If planting a few trees in Ottawa will help reduce the carbon footprint from here, Why aren't the billions of trees already existing in this country soaking up all of the carbon dioxide we produce, plus the carbon dioxide of many other countries? There are more forests, more land in agriculture, grassland in Canada than any other nation, including Russia, by the way. Our population, I once again point out, occupy only about 2% of the land mass. We produce 1.6% of the world's emissions. But I suggest to you that we're soaking up probably about, well, I won't give you a percentage, but far more CO2 emissions than we could possibly admit. John, any reaction to this point?
Yes, sir. And it's funny, in our brief conversation yesterday where we talked a little bit about green energy, I think in reference to the OC Transpo buses, the first thing that popped into my mind was exactly this. And, where's the input output ratio? I don't know what you want to term it, but we're not being shown those numbers. And I mean, yeah. So I think I briefly said yesterday, sarcastically said, it doesn't fit the narrative. Well, I mean, it's a very one-sided conversation if you're not showing the input and the output, so to speak.
But the question is, why are we doing this? Because if in fact we're really worried about global emissions, then it would seem to me that we would go to the countries that in fact are producing far more emissions than they are soaking up, to wit, China, India. This is where, in fact, all of the Western nations should be going to China and saying, listen, China, we're going to help you convert your coal-fired plants, same with India, into gas-fired or whatever it is, or nuclear or whatever it is. That's where the fight should be. Why is the fight in Canada, which, as I say, must be soaking up far more than we produce? Why are we paying the bill? Go ahead, John. What are people saying?
All right. Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, all of your show links. If you just go to lowellgreen.com or btrradio.com/lowellgreen, all of your show links are right there. And 613-413-2217 is the number. Ann says, no, but this liberal government is like a dog with a bone on their climate change mission. Peter says, just scams. So people like Suzuki and Trudeau Foundation soak up our money.
Okay, that's fine. But why do you think they're doing this? Do you think that they honestly believe that we are producing more than we're soaking up? Or do you think there's another agenda underway here? Why the real question, why are we doing this? Because any thoughtful person would realize, wait a minute, hold it. If a few trees in Ottawa soak up, what about the billions of trees and the rest of the country? What about all the water? Water soaks up CO2 too. So, and the other question that really bothers and puzzles me is, how come we know, as I say, exactly how many tons of CO2 being emitted by cows and horses, but they can't tell us how much is being soaked up by our forests? That I find very strange. They can all figure out how much we're producing, but apparently no attempt is being made to find out how much we're soaking up. Go ahead, John, please.
All right, some answers to your question starting to flow in. Why are we doing this? Tony on YouTube suggests it's all wealth redistribution. Mike says it's just another money grab. And Ken says, yes, there is another agenda. I think the carbon tax is ultimately designed to change our behavior instead of funding green energy emissions.
But change our behavior for what purpose? That's the question. For what purpose?
Now you're going to hear from all the conspiracy theorists on that.
Well, that's fine.
Okay.
Those people exist too. Go ahead.
613-413-2217. This person says, Lowell, yes, Canada's environment does absorb tons of carbon, but the greenies say fires and rotting plants release it back into the environment. Either way, you are correct. It is certainly not worth the money and sacrificing our economy for the little amount we do emit. Maybe send money and technology to clean up those dirty countries.
Yeah, I've heard this argument. Oh, the rotting trees, etc. I mean, that's bullshit. Come on. There's somehow or other that all of these forests are producing CO. No. They're soaking up. They're soaking it up, and we know that trees and water. Okay, if you're going to say, well, the tree. Well, what about all of the water? The Great Lakes, the largest body of fresh water in the world. So, what about all the CO2 that's being soaked up there? Go ahead, please, John.
All right, says Ken has a response. What is the other agenda? He says to stop using fossil fuels and move to electric vehicles, etc. Okay, Ken, so the question then becomes, okay, why?
Yeah, why?
Why? What's the end game here? What's the purpose of that then? Who's
Yeah, that's key here. We're not thinking deeply enough here.
yeah?
What
What's the
what
win?
what is yeah? What's the win? What is this really going on? We know there. I don't think there's any question that the global climate is changing. I think it's been changing since the ice age, and it could very well be that CO2 is contributing somewhat to it. Well, I'm not denying that. I'm not a fool, but I mean, if we're really concerned about it, then go to the real source. The real source is mainly China and India. Those are the places where it's being emitted. Go ahead, please, John.
613-413-2217. The email address, lowell@blasttheradio.com. Here's an email from Les. First time we've heard from you, Les. Thank you. CO2 is plant food. If it falls below 150 parts per million in the atmosphere, plants begin to die. You are correct. This is a scam.
One of the things that a lot of people don't know, and I write about this in my latest book, and a lot of people don't believe this. The University of Maryland, a very legitimate university in the United States, has done very thorough research using satellites, etc., on the existence of forests on the planet. They have discovered something that's very strange, well, certainly something that we never suspected, and that is that, in fact, and probably because of CO2, the world's forests are actually growing. According to the university study at the University of Maryland, and by the way, anybody can get this. If you just Google University Study Maryland, you'll be able to track it down. All of the research being done. The research indicates that the amount of forest equal to about the size of the state of Texas has increased. That's how much. I know I'm not explaining it here. That's how much forests globally have expanded since the 50s. There are far more forests which would cover more or less the state of Texas more today than there were in the 50s. Our forests are growing. So all of these stories about clear cut, they don't clear cut, not in this country anymore. And every time a tree is cut in this country, more are planted. We all know that. But the fact of the matter is the world's forests are growing. And it's probably because of the more CO2 in the atmosphere. I just thought I'd pass that along. There's a lot of information out there that a lot of people aren't aware of. Go ahead, please, John.
I had a feeling we'd hear from Murray on that. He says, are you guys just pretending to not get it? And he goes back to the you'll have nothing and be happy comment in line. So
you know what, Murray? Let's deal with the issue here and stop trying to insult us, okay? Go ahead.
Well, I think what he's saying is it's all part of this big global reset that Murray subscribes to and believes in.
But the real why? What's the purpose? Who gains from this?
There you go. There you go. And that's the question I've been asking, and I have yet to get an answer to. Okay, why? And how is it we have all these leaders in the world who can't agree on the simplest of things, but we've all come to a consensus on this, and we're all going to give up our positions of power so that one leader can take over the world?
No, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
Yeah. All right.
They're breathing fairy dust there. Go ahead.
As long as it's clean fairy dust. All right, Kelly says, I believe that if they actually told us the amount of CO2 sucked up by all the trees, it would blow up their agenda and expose the greed from the elites who are pushing this crap. These people make a ton of money from green energy and pushing the climate change agenda.
Let me throw out a thought here, a new thought. It has been suggested that what's really going on in this country is that we have a prime minister who is narcissistic. I think we all agree on that. And most narcissists, why are this way? What they want to appear to be virtuous without actually being virtuous. And I think there's a great deal of that involved here when you stop and think about it. This, particularly on the world stage, makes our prime minister look very virtuous. He's leading the world in green energy, et cetera, and the whole world is scared about global warming, et cetera. So our prime minister is able to appear very virtuous, and that apparently is, in the case of almost all narcissists, this is what they want. Narcissists want to appear to be very virtuous without actually exercising any virtue themselves. I just throw that out as as a maybe that's what it's all about. Just a few people trying to look very virtuous. Go ahead, please.
A lot of comments rolling in. We thank you for those. Let's take a quick little break, though, and talk about shields, if you would, sir.
Yes, talking about virtuous, I don't know how virtuous they are up there in Pakenham, but I'm going to tell you this: if you're dealing with shields, you're dealing with honest people. I think that's very important in today's business world. You do not last since 1947, same family, unless you're very honest. Believe me, particularly in the valley. It doesn't take people in the valley, or for the most part in Ottawa, for that matter, either, to understand somebody's just not quite right, not playing fair. There's a lot of companies come and go. Shields is still there, folks, which means you're dealing with good, solid people. And as I told you yesterday, I checked out on dishwashers, for example, and I found that on several models, brand names, world brand names, that in fact, Shields is selling at least the same price, in some cases a little bit lower than the box stores. So, and they've got a very good finance plan. www.shields.ca. Got a great website, everything you could possibly want: furniture, mattresses, appliances, and now they're a registered dealer for Sony as well. Good people, folks. You know what? If possible, we should deal with good people. Thank you. Go ahead, John.
All right, let's go back to text. The government sees carbon as a revenue stream. As well, this movement has created new automobile companies who create e-cars. So maybe the politicians are also getting kickbacks from these companies as well as the battery producers. That's a text at 613-413-2217. I'm going to go back to the very top of the page, Lowell, and it's a long list today. The question on the screen is Canada contributing anything at all to global warming? That was the initial question. The answer from Kevin, 0. Hines says very little of the greenhouse gases are caused by us. Donald says no, it's all going into the liberal pockets. Craig gives you a direct answer to that question. No. Terry says no. Trudeau just wants to look good on the world stage. Look at that.
That's it. That's. I just wonder how much of that is behind. Excuse me, behind this. That we have a prime minister who wants to appear to be very virtuous. He's saving the planet. What could be more virtuous than saving the planet? Saving us all from Armageddon, from burning up in hell. Here is the man. He's going to save the planet. I think there's a good deal of that, to be honest with you. And of course, we've got all of this, his followers following in behind. And I'm going to be very honest. There are a lot of people who really believe that the planet's going to burn up and that we're partially at fault. So, it's a small wonder that a lot of people believe it. We've been told this you realize, for over 20 years, right? Go ahead, John.
And they play the card too. It's your children's future at stake. Your children are going to die when the planet.
What could be more virtuous than saving us from that?
Right.
Go ahead.
Here's Tony on YouTube. He says this is an actual headline from the CBC. Quote, Canada's forests actually emit more carbon than they absorb, despite what you heard on Facebook.
Wait a minute. Hold it. Who figured this out? I'd like to see the scientific research behind that. That's a stuffing nonsense.
Let's go to email. Yep. Lowell at blasttheradio.com. Deborah, thank you for your email. She says, the Liberals' climate change agenda is a fraud. Mankind is not causing the problems, but we are paying the price for someone and some business or country to become rich. As always, follow the money, she suggests. Paul is in from Canada. Thank you, Paul. He says, hi, Lowell, regarding our greenhouse emissions. When I look at the government plan for reducing emissions, they have a plot that shows basically all of our economic sectors and their emissions, each going down by about 40% by 2023. Agriculture, transportation, etc., about 7 sectors in total. To me, when the priority is all sectors equally, it shows the government has not prioritized anything. This is not a plan, but everyone running around like chickens with no heads in a panic to reduce all emissions. It's the perfect project of a former children's motivational speaker. Quote, JT. There you go.
Okay.
Another email, this one from Jamie. He says, I don't think Canada is contributing to global warming as much as other countries because we have always been very conscientious about it. Until the other countries like China and India are made to take more responsibility, this needs to stop. We should be putting our money towards healthcare and making Canada self-sufficient again. And think of all the trees that will be ruined erecting those windmills. I joked about before we got on the air, Lowell.
Yeah, the question here is, do you believe that all of our forests, the grasslands, the water, are soaking up far more emissions than we could possibly produce? I once want to point this out again. A lot of people don't believe this, but it's true. Humans inhabit about 2% of this country's landmass. The rest is forests, water, mountains, grassland, agricultural land, and crops. We inhabit about 2% of the land. Do you really think with all of those forests? Okay, you want to say that forests are not soaking up? Well, if trees in Ottawa are soaking up, how come they're not like up in Hudson's Bay? I don't understand here, but I'm beginning to really be suspicious. Go ahead, John, please.
Guess they build the trees there differently. All right, Nancy says Justin
Yeah.
talks a lot about global warming, so we do not complain about having no doctors. Tina Marie is laughing. She's like, they use jets to fly from country to country to talk about emissions. And by the way, we have so many comments today, I can't even keep up. So I'll keep plowing through these. Dean says, nope, we'll continue punishing ourselves with carbon taxes for the 2% contribution we make to global emissions. Meanwhile, China and India continue to build new coal plants on a monthly basis.
You know, it's not just the carbon tax that is punishing us. It's the destruction of the oil and gas industry, the destruction of we can't provide Europe with desperately needed natural gas and oil. That's a big part of it as well. There's over 100,000 people lost their jobs from the oil industry, etc. So it goes far beyond just the carbon tax. And for me, the main concern that I have is that we have concentrated and continue to concentrate and spend far more money to fight CO2 emissions than we do on healthcare. But healthcare is desperate. Now, I hope you realize that healthcare in this. I'm 86 years old. I live in fear. Like if I have to go to hospital for God knows what, am I going to sit in an emergency ward for 20 hours? I mean, how am I going to do that?
Well, and you recently did have to go to hospital. We remember that very, very well. And I mean, you must feel
3 days before they could find a bed. I mean, yeah,
but even then, in that circumstance, you must, seeing what's going on now, what is it, a year and a half later or so, you must feel like you, pardon the pun, but dodged a bullet.
And yet here we have one of our mayoralty candidates wants to spend $280 million on bike paths. Now, if she wanted to spend $280 million on healthcare clinics or education for doctors or nurses or healthcare or something, that I could. But in the midst of with the crisis we have in healthcare, she wants to spend $280 million, and much of that borrowed money. I mean, that's how mad these people have become. Go ahead, John.
Start generating revenue. Start taxing the bikers. License the bikers. And hey, you know where a good place to start is? Saying this as someone who got cut off 3 times this morning by cyclists going through red lights, etc., and flipping me off while they do it. How about fining the cyclists and stop putting up PR?
Let's get back to the topic.
All right,
let's get back to the topic.
I need my own show, Lowell. All right. Yeah. Ray asked this question earlier, and Valda is asking the same question. What has all this carbon tax money accomplished so far?
Nothing. I mean, we haven't met any of the emissions targets. In fact, far from it, which includes, by the way, the Conservatives. Nobody has ever been able to meet it. Look, if we're going to meet the targets being set, essentially we would have to shut the country down. Manufacturing would have to stop. Now they're trying to even stop agriculture. Now the farms are now the target of this government. And I believe that a great deal of it is just this desire to appear virtuous, that we've got a prime minister and a government now that's going to save the planet. That, I feel, is the main motivating factor here. Go ahead, please, John.
Hey, folks, thanks for sharing the show on your social media. That's so important to us. If you can, we sure appreciate that. And it's so simple to do, too.
Today, I couldn't, sorry, John, I couldn't agree with you more. I think we've thrown out a lot of new ideas today.
Yep.
And thought starters in many cases. And I would really appreciate it, even though you've shared before, if you could share this program today. Let's get some new thoughts out there, some new questions.
And we are today.
Yeah. Let's get people questioning here. Wait a minute, hold it. Aren't all of these trees and the water and the grassland, aren't they soaking up CO2? What's the real reason here? That I think is let's see if we can get more people thinking about that and questioning. Thank you, John. We've had some very good reaction. We're right out of time here, folks. Please share. Just push the share button. You'll help. Thanks a lot. We'll be back tomorrow.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.